Today's lesson is 8.2. Yesterday, 8.1, we talked about slope, and I did bring up slope-intercept form, so we can go ahead and get started by filling in these top boxes here. Slope-intercept form, as we talked about in 8.1, y equals mx plus b. Of course, it gets its name because the slope is the m, and the b is the y-intercept. Let me give you an example of a filled-in equation. So maybe it's 3x minus 7. Here your slope would be 3, your intercept would be -7. Point slope form is less familiar. It looks like this. Y minus y1 equals m, x minus x1. And an example could be y minus 2 equals 4x plus 5. So in this, the name is point slope. So the point comes from this x1, y1, and the slope is the m. So my slope here is 4, and my point, notice there's a negative built into the equation. So it's going to be the opposite of what you see here. It's going to be -5. And right here, the y value is going to be 2. The negative is in the formula. This is part of the formula. The y value is 2. So in point slope form, you figure out a point and a slope. Standard form is ax plus by equals c. And an example of that filled in might be 5x plus 2y equals 20, something like that. And notice it doesn't say point or slope in it, so by just looking at it, you can't really tell any specific points, but it is helpful for certain types of problems. Number 1, write an equation from the given information. So any of these 3 that we just talked about are equations. If it doesn't tell you which form you have to be in, you get to pick. So for number 1, if they tell me the slope and the y-intercept, I'm definitely going to pick slope-intercept. So y equals, then I fill in my slope, 10x plus my intercept. Now you're probably thinking, well, do I have to put plus minus? No, I don't really want you to, but I was just trying to show you that there's a plus in the formula. So then you'll change this to make it look a little neater. This. Your slope is 10, just like it says. Your y-intercept is -7, just like it says. Number 2, we are given the slope and a point. So we're going to use, of course, point slope. So here we go. Y minus, and then you fill in your y value, 8, equals m, your slope, x minus, and then you fill in your x value. The only thing you need to do here is simplify the minus and negative. Minus and negative is plus. So there is your equation. Don't distribute the half because then it will no longer be in point slope form. So you can see, depending on what information you're given, kind of determines what form you want to go to. If they give you slope and intercept, obviously slope intercept. If they give you a point and a slope, like they did here, point slope, then you do point slope form. Okay, let's look at 3. Write an equation in slope-intercept form for the given information. So we have to write it in this form. The only problem is we know the slope, but we don't know the intercept. So we can't just pick one of those numbers and just call it the y-intercept, the b value. So what you have to do here is you have to get it in another form first. Just make sure your final answer is in this form. Let me say that again. Get it in another form first. Make sure your final answer is in what they ask you for, slope-intercept. So where should I start? What kind of form do I have, or what information do I have? I have a slope and a point. So we're going to start in point slope. then change to slope intercept, because we can't start with slope intercept if we don't know the intercept. So let's go ahead and start in point slope. So the formula is, you have it on your paper, you can see y minus y1 equals m x minus x1. If you want to simplify this minus a negative, we can do that. Now I have done step one. I have put it in point slope because that's the information I was given. Now I'm going to take what I have in step one and I'm going to change it to slope intercept. In other words, I'm going to get y by itself. So how will I get y by itself? I'm going to start by distributing the 5. And y is almost by itself. I just need to subtract 6. Now I did exactly what the directions said. Write an equation in slope intercept form. The key is you can't start there because you don't know the intercept. So you do what we wrote up here. You start in a different form, and then you can change it to slope intercept by getting y by itself. Number 4. We have a line going through the points -4, 5, and 2, 6. Now, this is a point and a point. We don't have something called point form. So this one's going to be the hardest one we've done so far. But we do have, we could call this our point. Can't we find the slope from 2 points? Let's do that. That's what we learned in 8.1. So let's go ahead and calculate the slope from the 2 points. So remember, that's change in y. So I'm going to subtract 6 minus 5. And then I'm going to subtract the x's. 2 minus -4. 6 minus 5 is 1. 2 minus a negative is plus, it'll be 6. So now I took my given information. I now have a slope and 2 points. Pick either point you want. I think it might be actually easier to pick this point because there's no negatives. So now we have a point and a slope. So let's do point slope form first. Here we go. Y minus y equals m x minus x. Now that it's in a form, now I can get y by itself to follow the directions of putting my final answer in slope intercept form. So let's go ahead and change this around so we can get y by itself. Let's distribute the 1/6. 1/6 times x is just 1/6 x. 1/6 times -2. You can use a calculator, but I think about top times top, 1 times 2, over bottom times bottom. Well, there isn't really a bottom, but we know it's 1. So it'll look like that. We could simplify that, or I'm just going to keep going, simplify when I'm done. Y is almost by itself, so I'm going to add 6 to both sides. So in my calculator, I'm going to write -2/6. I might put that in parentheses. -2 divided by 6 plus 6. Then I'm going to put that back into a fraction. So that's going to be 17/3. So in terms of your calculator may not look like mine, but it will be similar, hopefully. So I'm going to show you kind of what we're doing here with this -2/6 plus 6. So I'm going to do parentheses, -2 divided by 6. That's how I type this fraction. And then I can put plus 6. Now, I don't really want to write that decimal when my slope is a fraction. It's nice to keep everything in a fraction then. So this is a button you're going to use all the time. Make sure you're paying attention how to turn this decimal into a fraction. Hit the math button. It's right here. Under my green alpha, it says math. And my first choice is fraction. That's what I want. So hit enter. You'll have to hit enter one more time. So math, enter, enter. That's how I got my 17/3. Okay. Number 5, write an equation in standard form from the given information. Standard form is ax plus by equals c. Now, none of these are a, b, and c, so don't think about just plugging them in. You're going to do the steps that we did last time. Get in a different form first. Then change to the form you want. So get it in any form I want first, and then I can change it into the form that I really want, which is, in this case, standard form. So what form should I start in if I'm given slope and a point? I should get it in point slope form. So let's go ahead and do that. Y minus y equals m, x minus x. Great, now we are ready to get it into this form, which we haven't done before, so we'll work through it together. Essentially, you want your x and your y value on the same side. Right now, my x is over here on the right, and my y is on the left. First, let's distribute the 1/2. So that's 1/2 x minus 5/2. All right, since my x's are on this side, I'm going to move the y to be on this side also. So I'm going to subtract y so that it's no longer on that side. So I have 1/2 x minus 5/2 minus y. Now that I have my x's and y's together, I need anything else to be on the other side. So I need to get rid of this 5/2. So I'm going to add 5/2 to both sides. So again, grab your calculator. -1 plus parentheses 5/2. We can turn it into a fraction. 3/2. Pause the video if you need to. On the right, I'm left with 1/2 x and the minus y. This is in this form. Your x and your y terms are on the same side, and all other numbers are combined on the other side. Now, before we circle this as our final answer, there's 3 things that always have to happen when you're in standard form. So if you'll go back to the very first page where I had this written down, I need you to write some things here about standard form. There's some rules we have to follow. Here's the rules. Number 1, a must be positive. Number 2, no decimals, no fractions. So when you write this, your a value has to be positive. It can't be -5. It could be 5, but not -5. And the whole thing cannot have decimals or fractions. So let's go back to what we have. This is one reason why I moved the y over, because my 1/2 is positive. I didn't want to move it to the other side because then it would become negative. So right now my a is positive, but I have fractions and I need to get rid of fractions, which is actually going to be pretty quick here. This is divided by 2. This is divided by 2. So that divide by 2 is what's making it a fraction. So if I just multiply both sides by 2, that will get rid of it. 2 times 3 halves. You can do it in your calculator, but you'll notice you're just going to get 3. 2 times 1/2 x is 1x, or x, either way you want to write it. 2 times negative y is negative 2y. This is my final answer in standard form. A is positive, A meaning the number in front of x, no decimals and no fractions. Definitely have to show work on those and they'd be worth more points. Our final question, write an equation in any form from the given information. We have a point and we know it's parallel to this equation. So this is also something you've learned before, but we'll review it. If two lines are parallel, you might want to take notes on this. They have the same slope. So if this has a slope of 5 and this is parallel to it, it will also have a slope of 5. If they are perpendicular, they have opposite reciprocal slopes. So if this one has a slope of 3/2, this one will have a slope of -2/3. Opposite meaning one's positive, one's negative. Reciprocal means flip the fraction. Okay, make sure you know that. If they're parallel, same slope. If they're perpendicular, opposite reciprocal slopes. So here we have a point, and we know it's parallel to the slope of this line. So what's the slope of this line? 3. What's the slope of a line parallel? Well, parallel means they have the same slope, so also 3. So now I have a point and a slope. Y, so we're going to do point slope form. Y minus y equals m x minus x. I can circle this as my final answer because it says any form. If they had asked me for point slope, I would get y by itself. If they had asked me for standard form, I would get x and y on the same side. Make sure that a is positive, no decimals, and no fractions. Number 7, write an equation in any form for the given information. It's perpendicular to the line shown and goes through this point. So we have a point, and we know it's perpendicular to this line. So let's find the slope of this line. So let's pick 2 good points. So maybe this one here, and this one here looks like a good point. Let's count the rise and the run. Rise 2, run 3. That's the slope of that line, but ours is perpendicular to that line. So what is perpendicular? This is a symbol for perpendicular. What is perpendicular to this? What is the opposite reciprocal? Opposite reciprocal. I now have a slope and a point. Those aren't my answers. I just want to circle those important pieces of information, because if I have a point and a slope, I can write the equation in point slope form. This is point slope form. Y minus y1 equals m x minus x1. So let's fill that in. Y minus my y, -2, equals m, -3/2, x minus my x value. You do need to simplify this. If there's a minus negative, that turns into a plus. And there's my equation in any form, specifically point slope for this one. Our last question. Are the lines parallel, perpendicular, or neither? Explain. So I have a line 1 and a line 2. Notice there's no graph. You don't need a graph. What do I need to determine if the lines are parallel or perpendicular? I need their slopes. So let's find the slope of the first line. Y minus y over x minus x. That simplifies. That simplifies also. I like to keep the negative out in front. You can leave it in the denominator. Divide both by 3. It's not my answer, but that's the slope of line 1. Now let's find the slope of line 2. So y minus y over x minus x. 5 minus 8 is negative 3. 11 minus 10 is 1. So are these slopes parallel, perpendicular, or neither? They are neither. Explain. Now you're probably thinking, no, they're perpendicular. No, they're not, because look, this one is negative and this one is also negative. That means they're not opposites. They're not opposite reciprocals, they're just reciprocals. So in your explanation, you can say their slopes are reciprocals, but not opposite reciprocals. Therefore, they are neither perpendicular nor parallel.